It really is the 10th anniversary of Five Nights at Freddy's, because a FNAF game shadow dropped before its announced release date. Into the Pit was supposed to come out yesterday on Thursday, but due to some whoopsies with the Japanese release, it released early, so they decided to just ship out the game worldwide on Wednesday around 5 p.m. EST, and it is so good, and I'm honestly glad it came out on Wednesday so I was able to make this video for you guys today. Today's video is useful to everyone, whether or not you've played Into the Pit yet, even if you've only heard of the game. The first chunk of this video will be spoiler free, and in fact it'll give you a good idea as to how the game plays and what the game is about. Kind of a see it before you buy it sort of deal. And don't worry, there will be a massive spoiler warning before we touch anything that could be considered a spoiler, which is the bulk of this video. So for now, just stay tuned. Slices, put on your aprons, and let's break down a recipe. So, what is Into the Pit? As a game, it looks and plays so visually distinctive from the rest of the FNAF franchise. It's further away from FNAF than FNAF World was. Well, Into the Pit is a survival stealth game with a heavy emphasis on puzzle solving, and it's based on one of the short stories from Fazbear Frights of the same name, Into the Pit. The game itself is really damn good, and it brings a lot of well-needed horror into the franchise. As far as replayability goes, the majority of the game is the same on most playthroughs. However, the game is rich with hidden secrets and Easter eggs and additional settings on replays, so you can customize your experience every time and you're likely to find something new. I mean, just as an example as to how deep these secrets can go, one of the tools you get very early on is your dad's phone, and you can use it to call a myriad of phone numbers. In fact, the first number you get is your mom in order to call her and see if everything's okay. At the very end of the game, I'm talking within 30 seconds of beating the game, if you call your mom again in the arcade, you actually pause. Like I said, no spoilers yet, but that's an example on some of the kinds of puzzles that you have to trial and error your way to solve. And that's a light example. This game is definitely worth checking out. It's only been 2 days and it's already one of my favorite FNAF games, if not #1. But I want to sleep on that to figure it out for sure. For now, let's talk plot. The game opens about halfway through the original story it's based on, actually, following Oswald, our main character, being driven to Jeff's Pizza by his father. He goes there every day to not be home alone during the summer. But this day, his dad is late in picking him up, and being annoyed about that, he tries to get back at his dad by hiding from him before he gets there. His idea is to hide in the abandoned ball pit in the back of Jeff's Pizza. He goes in, but when he comes out, he's not in Jeff's Pizza anymore. Well, the building itself is the same, but now it's decorated as a Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. In fact, everything is retro, seeing a calendar in another room, we're in 1985 all of a sudden, in a Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, the restaurant that Jeff's Pizza was before Jeff took over. At this 1985 Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, Oswald has a great time. He plays around with some kids he meets, does some arcade games, plays tag, he even plays hide and seek. But when he's playing hide and seek, he makes his way into a storage room and finds the empty suit of Fredbear. He hides inside of it and successfully wins hide and seek, but while he's back there, the yellow rabbit appears. This organic looking, breathing, dark creature who peers in on him through the eyes but doesn't see him. Then everything shifts. The restaurant is darker and everyone is screaming and trying to run out the building. Oswald instead looks for his new friends that he just made and finds the yellow rabbit, beckoning him to the party room that was previously locked. Once following, Oswald encounters the missing child incident. Again, this is like maybe 15 minutes into the game. This is the premise, and we're already seeing for the first time a non-Atari styled adaptation of the missing child incident. Oswald then runs for it, trying to escape the ball pit, and it works. He gets back to the other side, finding Jeff and his father. But after Jeff leaves, his father is attacked by that yellow rabbit from the pit and is dragged inside. Oswald drags him back out, but his father is different, his eyes glowing. Once they get to the car, Oswald realizes that yellow rabbit has replaced his father, but only he can see the difference. Everyone else thinks his dad is just fine. He realizes that his dad must be back in that ball pit, and he resolves to escape his house, get back to the ball pit, and find his father. And that's pretty much where the game kicks off. So that's the description and premise for this game. Moving forward, we're going to step into spoiler territory. This is my best pitch for you on what this game is and what it's about. I highly recommend buying and playing this game before you watch the rest of this video. The game really kicks off from there. During the following daytime sections, you collect items and survive daily life, going to school and acting as though everything's normal. And at night, you escape the house, enter the ball pit, and look for your father. Each night, Oswald saves a different kid and explores the pizzeria just a little bit more. Eventually, on the 5th night, we make our way back into the very same party room where the missing child incident happened, and we find the 5th child we save, who lets us know that she didn't see any grown-ups, but she heard some man groaning through the vent. So we climb through it, and we find ourselves in the secret safe room that every Freddy Fazbear's Pizza is equipped with, and inside is our father tied to a chair. We untie him, but we get interrupted by the yellow rabbit, who drags our father off. We chase after them and find the rabbit and our father fighting just outside the ball pit. And this is where we start to see our different endings, and where the endings diverge. If up until this point you have just played the game and not gone after any collectibles or didn't get the collectibles you needed already, then you're met with the 1-star ending, a bad one. You and your father barely escape through the ball pit, and on the other side, while you're still recuperating, the yellow rabbit jumps out, grabs Oswald, and goes back into the pit. We then cut to Oswald tied up in a chair much like his father was, and it's implied that the yellow rabbit kills him. This is a very sad ending, but it's not the only bad ending actually. At any point after your first encounter with the yellow rabbit, you can just leave through the front doors of the pizzeria in the past. If you do so, Oswald leaves it and gets lost and confused, not sure where he is, which you then get the ending implying that you just abandon your father in the pizzeria and try to make a new life in 1985. It's very reminiscent of that main door exit ending from Security Breach. But there are better endings to be had, all of them being locked behind collectibles. Throughout the pizzeria, you can collect items from your father that are connected to memories that the both of you share, much like the Mario items in Luigi's Mansion. If you collect all 5 of them, then one more item spawns in the party room where the MCI happened, a mysterious photo with the figures scratched out. In-game, you really can't make much of it, but the achievement photo actually shows the silhouettes of what looks like William and Henry. Not only that, but in the files, someone found a scrapped concept for this photo, which was likely planned to be inspected, but they decided against it, where it's definitely William and Henry, at least according to their character encyclopedia descriptions. This photo is what unlocks the canon ending. In the final fight, as you and your father leave through the ball pit, that photo falls out of Oswald's pocket, and in the moment, the yellow rabbit instead goes after the photo, getting confused and having a little freakout section. This buys you just a bit of time, so that when you're on the other side, you recuperate before the yellow rabbit pops out, leaving Oswald to give that final punch from the book, which gets the yellow rabbit stuck in the netting, and its struggling ends up hanging itself in the ropes. The pair then reunite, reconcile, and leave. But this is just the 2-star ending, because after the credits, you get a scene where Jeff goes to investigate the ball pit and finds that yellow rabbit, who's still alive, and attacks him. To get the 3-star ending, we're not done collecting items yet. Throughout the game, there are pieces of arcade machines that can be collected to repair the present-day Jeff's Pizza broken down machines. If you repair every single arcade machine and play 3 secret mini-games on top of collecting that photo, you unlock the 3-star ending. It's the same ending, but the post-credit scene is changed to a much happier one. Jeff seems to have renovated his restaurant with the funds from those arcade machines, and we see him serving a happy family at the new restaurant. This is the best, but likely non-canon ending. So that's the major plot of the game. But what are the secrets that I keep mentioning? Like I said before, throughout the game you can find multiple pieces of technology that can be used to repair the arcade machines in present-day Jeff's Pizza. This unlocks a token-free version of that arcade machine that you can play in safety and earn tickets for. Every 20 tickets gets you a prize voucher. Those prize vouchers can be used at the machine in the middle of the arcade to get 4 prizes. The first is a handheld game console, which can be used to trade with a delinquent for a firecracker. The other 3 are stickers that you place in a sketchbook that you get from this girl named Gabrielle. The arcade machines are mostly just fun side minigames that you can play. By the way, Helpules is by far the most efficient arcade machine to grind in. You get 1 ticket per rep, and most people can get about 10 reps per game. But there is one really big secret in this Balloon Boy minigame where you collect party hats. Once you collect 5, there's a secret wall that you can walk through. You go through a dilapidated party room, then pop 5 balloons, and then you find this sprite of Purple Guy dangling a 6th party hat over a pit. You can catch it and then head back to win 6 out of 5 hats. This game has some implications. It could be argued that this is saying the missing child incident had a 6th victim we didn't know about thus far, but that's speculation. If all of these arcade machines are fully repaired, then you get a chance to get the 3-star ending, but to do so, you need to beat 3 secret minigames. So what are they, and how do we get them? All of these minigames are available and accessible during Night 5. One of them is specifically only accessible right before the end of the game, but I believe the other 2 can be accessed during Night 5 at any moment. The first is accessed by calling Mom during Night 5. It's that secret I mentioned in the intro. If you do so, you get this minigame, where you play as Eleanor from Fazbear Frights, granting a girl a wish. You build her a more and more beautiful body until eventually giving her a necklace. She then turns into a pile of trash and the minigame ends. This is the minigame based off the Fazbear Frights story, To Be Beautiful. The story is essentially this minigame. This girl met Eleanor and repaired her, and Eleanor promised to grant her one wish. Her wish was to be beautiful, so every night she woke up more and more beautiful, so long as she wore the necklace that Eleanor gave her, a silver heart pendant. By the end of the story, she looks completely different, but she falls and her necklace comes off. She can't quite get it back on, and while she's struggling, her body is turning into garbage. She runs home and finds Eleanor, by this point almost being entirely garbage. She finds in the garage several bags of her own chopped up body parts. Eleanor takes the necklace from her and puts it on, appearing like the girl did at the beginning of the story, and leaves. It's implied Eleanor was slowly replacing this girl's body with garbage, but using the necklace to make her appear more beautiful instead. The second minigame is, in my opinion, the longest to get. In the dining room, specifically just before the end of the game. Like I mentioned, your father gets dragged out of the safe room and then you go to the ball pit for the final confrontation. It's in between those 2 moments where this minigame is accessible. You go to the candy machine and you have to spam it. And I'm talking like 50 plus times you have to activate this candy machine. Hey, Mega Cat Studios, if you're watching this video, amazing game. Love this game. Might be my favorite FNAF game of all time. I get this secret. He mentions he could just sit here forever and eat it. It could have been like 20. You didn't need to make it like 50. Hell, he says 25 cents. He could have made it 25. Wouldn't have taken this long at least. But eventually, and you do get some secret messages as you spam, you get this minigame, which looks a lot like Foxy Go Go Go, which I believe is on purpose. You play as this girl going into a room collecting 5 objects, and the objects change each time, until eventually it's just Bon Bon on Funtime Freddy's hand. Collecting that, the girl starts crying, and the minigame ends. This is the minigame based off of the Fazbear Frights story, Count the Ways. This story is essentially a really sad goth girl named Millie is obsessed with death, and she winds up hiding in Funtime Freddy's chest, to which she gets trapped. Funtime Freddy then starts listing all the ways that he could possibly kill her in incredibly graphic detail. She eventually chooses the guillotine, hoping to avoid it at the last minute and break out. The story ends ambiguously, but in the later epilogues we meet Millie's spirit, assuming that she failed to escape. The third secret minigame is the only one with prerequisites. If you've beaten enough arcade machines to get the handheld console and all 3 stickers, when in Night 5, you have to interact with the prize voucher machine. Some people argue you need an extra voucher token, but I don't think you do. You can find out yourself. I don't remember having one when I accessed it. But when you do, you find the minigame Find the Balloons, in which we're in a essentially Find Them styled minigame, but for Jeff's Pizza, along with Golden Freddy and the same room layout. You collect 6 red balloons throughout the area, and once you do, the party room is unlocked. Inside is a robot dog on top of a prize counter. You give the 6 balloons and you win. But when you leave, the text is replaced with "See you," and the robot dog mauls us to death. The game even zooms in on your face. This is the game based on the Fazbear Frights story, Fetch. In it, a boy named Greg is exploring an abandoned pizzeria and finds Fetch, this old Fazbear toy shaped like a dog. It's meant to sync up with your phone and get anything you want for you. It fetches. But throughout the story, it's incredibly violent and starts doing things without Greg wanting to. For example, he doesn't like this one kid, and then the kid gets attacked. He wants this girl to like him, and the girl gets killed, and her body is brought to his room. Upon the end of the story, he finds this body, screams, and he receives one final text from Fetch, "See you," the same letters, essentially being "see you later." beating all these games and collecting the old photo and repairing all of the arcade games unlocks that 3-star ending. But that's not where this game's secrets end. Far from it. There are a lot of Easter eggs in this game, and I'll try to add as many as the community found here. First off, opening the attic door can cause this Freddy mask to fall out. Upon inspection, you can actually trade it with the delinquent for the firecracker instead of the game console, so it's just another option there, which is cool. There's actually a lot of other options you can do to accomplish the same goal. For example, there's, I believe, 4 ways to escape the house, but you only ever really need to do it 3 times. So one of them isn't going to be used on each playthrough. Some people say that this Freddy mask is hinting that Oswald's father might be the Freddy bully. Others say it's a reference to You're the Band, where a kid gets hypnotized by a Freddy mask. It's honestly hard to say, but it's a cool inclusion nonetheless. In the past arcade, the first time you visit while it's still happy, if you interact with the arcade machines, you can find that all of the high scores are topped by someone named GGY. This is a reference to the Tales in the Pizzaplex story of the same title, which is wild to think about, because either this is just an Easter egg, or somehow GGY, which is Gregory under the control of Glitchtrap, was at the 1985 pizzeria, or also traveled in the pit. Either way, it's crazy. This Kids at Play sign outside of the school, believe it or not, is another reference. In fact, to another short story titled Kids at Play. This short story is crazy. Essentially, a dude runs over a kid, runs over a Kids at Play sign, and then his paranoia starts driving him crazy, because if the police find the kid and he's still alive, he's going to jail. Eventually, his paranoia and guilt catch up to him, and his body, Telltale Heart style, compels him to walk to the area of the accident in the middle of the night, and his body graphically morphs into a Kids at Play sign. Like, his eyes fall out, his skin peels off, it's crazy. And it's noted that these Kids at Play signs have these weird gross brown puddles underneath them. The reveal being, it's the body parts that were peeled off to form into the sign. Lo and behold, you see that puddle underneath this Kids at Play sign? Rarely in Oswald's room, this poster can instead be the cover for the Twisted Ones. And even more rarely, and this is actually debated on how you trigger it, some people say you wait in Oswald's room for 10 minutes, but I tried that and it didn't work, so it's not really clear how this happens, but a very important character can appear outside Oswald's bedroom's window, the Stitch Wraith, one of the main characters of the epilogues of Fazbear Frights. And thank God we finally have a good in-game visual of both the Stitch Wraith and Eleanor. Now I can stop using these cropped graphic novel pictures. Or for the Stitch Wraith, this one picture we have from the character encyclopedia. We also get a one-line reference to a Fazbear Frights story, What We Found. In this book title, nothing divided in half is nothing. It's a line from the story. There's also a series of Easter eggs you can find on your phone. You can call the several phone book numbers to just have fun conversations. You can, without prompting, call 911, and you'll find out that 911 services were disbanded in this town for budget reasons, and instead to call your local police station. You can call this poster number, which gives you a line to Freddy's, which you then hear a special they have, the Golden Bite, with an 83-slice pizza. This is a crazy reference, and they threw in exotic butters too. The coolest one in my opinion is if you dial 777-4648. Now this number was found by digging through the game files. No one's really sure how we're supposed to figure this out in-game. The best guess anyone has is that this technically spells out Spring T in phone dial text. Essentially how like some phone numbers would be like 1-800-CALL-NOW. The same thing applies with this, but Spring T. If you call it, you get this audio. Intense. Seemingly, this is the audio of William Afton getting spring-locked, and it's badass. Like, look at it overlaid. Finally, we get this big Easter egg room. It's the safe room, the Freddy safe room. In order, the photo of Henry and William from the Silver Eyes, Endo 02, possibly a reference to Charlie's science project and the Twisted Ones, the movie Balloon Boy figure, It's Me, Garrett's plane from the movie, And this thing, it's probably a reference to something, I can't clock it. Now, there are plenty of more Easter eggs in this game. Honestly, probably most of them have still yet to be found. This game is only 3 days old, and every hour somebody finds something new, which is really cool. It feels like that old FNAF 1 through 4 feeling again, where we just keep finding shit. I can't wait what else will be found. But I hear you. This is all really cool. The plot is awesome. The Easter eggs are sick. How does this game affect the timeline? Does it affect the timeline? Is it in the game's continuity? Well, it's complicated. So there's a lot of ways this debate can go. On one hand, the name of the game is Five Nights at Freddy's Into the Pit, and nowhere is it stated to not be in continuity or to be a spin-off. So on one hand, yeah, of course it is. It's an official game. But then in the interview with Dawko, Scott mentioned this game was born out of the idea that Mega Cat Studios can make physical cartridge games, and it was meant to just be like a fun spin-off cartridge thing, but it grew bigger and better over time and became a full official game. So was it intended to not be part of the continuity but now is? Or is it still not? Is it just meant to be its own fun thing? Even if the game is in continuity, what parts of it are? This game is full of Easter eggs. There's 3 minigames that directly tell the story of Fazbear Frights stories, but then again, there's Easter eggs from Fazbear Frights, Tales from the Pizzaplex, The Silver Eyes, which is definitely not in continuity, other games, and the movie, which everyone agrees is not in the game's continuity. So what about those references? And if those references aren't, what about other references? What inclusions are Easter eggs? And what inclusions are lore-intentioned references? It's really hard to say. I've even heard people make a very strong argument that this game is an in-universe game. After all, the main menu is on a TV screen, the game over screens and credits are on a TV screen, and other like the settings, the pause menu, like it's very clearly in a TV screen. So is that supposed to cue us in that this is an in-universe game? But even if it is an in-universe game, that doesn't necessarily mean it's not in continuity. After all, Help Wanted implies that FNAF 1 through 6 are in-universe games, but they tell true stories, so they still happened in continuity. Truthfully, sitting here, I am not sure what to make of this game's continuity. I don't know how it affects the grander timeline yet, but one thing is for certain, there's a lot of ways it can go, and this game is one of the best FNAF games we've ever gotten. And in the Dawko interview, Scott mentioned that he wanted to work with Mega Cat Studios again, possibly making a game like this for Fetch. And I'm all for it. This game was amazing. There are a lot of theories to be made about this game, but they all deserve their own videos. I think for the purposes of this video, it's best I end here. So what do you think of the game? How does it compare to other FNAF games in your opinion? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Into the Pit came out 2 weeks ago, and I still can't get over how good the game is. From the scares, to the visuals, to the gameplay itself, it's just fun and scary and everything I love about Five Nights at Freddy's. But a big part about this game is how many new fans it's bringing into the franchise. Either people who were turned off from the lack of scares in recent years, or brand new fans who didn't really like the traditional gameplay of FNAF, seeing this new kind of game and being interested. And from what I can see online, it seems like a lot of new and more casual FNAF fans are pretty confused as to what this game is actually saying. Even for long-standing veteran FNAF fans, the actual minutia of what's going on is strange, especially if you haven't read the book, since this game is based off of one of the short stories. 2 weeks ago, I made a breakdown video on the actual plot of the game that we see directly and some Easter eggs we find within. But today I wanted to delve into the theory side of things. So this is going to be a lot more speculative, but I'll bring up evidence when it's available. Today, I'm going to delve into the true story of Into the Pit and what's actually going on. Or at least what I think is. After all, like the saying goes, it is just a theory. So slices, put on your aprons and let's bake ourselves a theory. So in case you forgot, didn't play the game for some reason, didn't watch somebody else play it, or just want a refresher, I think it is important to do a very brief plot summary on what exactly we see happening in the game without speculation. I'll keep it quick, but skip ahead if you don't want to hear it. There's chapters down there. The game basically follows Oswald and his family, who are under some pretty severe money troubles after the mill in town closed down, the same place his father used to work. They can't move away from town because they have a grandma who lives nearby who needs help often. So in this new situation, Oswald has to spend every day of his summer at Jeff's Pizza so he's not home alone. But eventually your father is late one day picking you up and Oswald gets annoyed. So he goes to hide in the ball pit to get back at his father and make him have to come in and find him. But when he goes back into that ball pit, it transports him back in time to 1985. He's in the same building, but it's when it was a Freddy Fazbear's Pizza in the past. At first, this is a dream come true. He's playing arcade games and meeting new friends, but eventually things take a turn for the worse, and he encounters this yellow rabbit creature, who leads him into the party room, showing him the 6 children that he's killed. He then tries to make Oswald the 7th. He barely escapes and manages to get back on the other side of the ball pit, meeting Jeff and his father, who then berates him for sneaking off. Jeff leaves, and before they can leave too, the yellow rabbit follows them through the ball pit, makes a grab, and gets Oswald's father, dragging him inside. Oswald pulls his father back out fairly quickly, but it's already too late. He comes back changed, with his eyes glowing and not speaking. By the car ride home, Oswald knows that his father has been replaced by the yellow rabbit, and that his actual father is still somewhere in the pit. So every night, Oswald sneaks out to return to that ball pit and look for his father. Each night, he finds another child who's trapped in that 1985's Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, and eventually, after freeing 5 of them, he finds his father tied up in the safe room. They both make it out of the ball pit, and Oswald manages to fight off the yellow rabbit, in the good ending at least. It then gets itself tied up in the ropes, the two reconcile, and they go home. So, like, what the hell was that? What does that actually mean? Is there time travel in Five Nights at Freddy's now? Probably not, but let's break it down. The biggest debate surrounding the lore of this game is most likely what the ball pit is actually doing. Are we actually traveling through time or not? It's an important question to ask. On one hand, I mean, that's what it seems like, right? The game makes it seem like we're traveling through time. After all, we go into a ball pit and we come out at a different time period. Not to mention, the things we do in the past affect the present. In the past, the yellow rabbit knocks down and destroys these glass doors. Then in the present, they're no longer there, as if when Jeff bought the place, there was broken doors and he just removed them. We need to scare somebody in the present, so we go back into the past and capture a rat. So it does seem like we're going back into the past, but how does a ball pit allow you to do that? Well, in Five Nights at Freddy's, there's no basis or explanation for why a ball pit would allow you to travel through time. Now, that's not necessarily a point against it. New things can always be added to a story. It could just be that the ball pit is capable of doing that just because, or that there is an explanation, but we don't have the answers to it as of yet in the series. It's going to be revealed later. But in my opinion, if we have no reason or explanation for how something is happening, but we can find a different explanation that does have evidence to back it up, it makes more logical sense to go with the other explanation. If I can explain what's actually happening with this ball pit using what we already know, then we don't have to assume something we don't know about, that being actual literal time travel. So if it isn't actual literal time travel, what could this be? Well, the books give us some more information on this very ball pit. In the original short story, Into the Pit, Oswald doesn't actually go back into the past after he goes to the past several times beforehand in the story, moments that we don't actually see in-game, but once the missing child incident happens in the past, Oswald never re-enters the ball pit. This was changed to make the game, more fun to play. So the actual story of Into the Pit doesn't tell us that much more about the ball pit that we don't already know. Lucky for us though, this very same ball pit is prominently featured in the epilogues. The Fazbear Frights epilogues tell a continuous story throughout the entire series, except for the last book, which was just showing some stories that didn't officially get released. It was a whole thing. That story features Detective Larson investigating the Stitch Wraith and combating Eleanor. That was a lot of names, and they're not super important for this theory, but just so you know who I'm talking about. Detective Larson is just a human trying to do the right thing. The Stitch Wraith is a combination of Agony and 2 spirits in one body, but their goal as a character is to collect William Afton's Agony and destroy it. Eleanor, on the other hand, we don't have a lot of information on her origin, but she's this weird, messed up version of Circus Baby that is apparently very pretty, and she's trying to collect William Afton's Agony to amass it into herself and become more powerful. So essentially, Detective Larson protagonist, Stitch Wraith anti-hero who turns out to be good guy, Eleanor antagonist. Basic summary. In the epilogues, after Eleanor has been defeated, the Stitch Wraith, who at this point in the story has just been Jake, one of the spirits, for a while now, finds himself at the very same ball pit in the abandoned Jeff's Pizza. Drawn to it, Jake collapses his body into the ball pit, feeling himself fall deeper and deeper until he doesn't even feel physical anymore. We then cut to the memory of a spirit, Millie. Millie is the main character from the story Count the Ways, and a quick summary to that, you've actually seen this story represented in Into the Pit if you got the 3-star ending. I'll describe the story first, see if you can figure out which minigame I'm referring to. In Count the Ways, Millie is annoyed at her family's gathering and sneaks off to do anything else, and she finds a Funtime Freddy to which she goes inside of. But once inside its stomach hatch, it closes in after her, not letting her out. Suddenly, the eyes of Funtime Freddy turn inwards to face her, and then Funtime Freddy begins listing off the several incredibly detailed and graphic ways that he could kill her, giving her the choice of her death. Millie doesn't want to die, she was just depressed and very gothic and talked about death a lot. So by the end of the story, Millie picks the guillotine in the hopes that she can dodge out of the way at the last second and escape. The story ends ambiguously, but the fact that we're seeing her spirit now kind of tells us what happened. Did you figure it out? This is the minigame you play when spamming the candy machine at night 5 of Into the Pit, where you see this girl recreating Foxy Go 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 in a way, but collecting 5 items until eventually collecting Bon Bon on Funtime Freddy's arm. These items that she's collecting are interpretations of ways that she could have been killed by Funtime Freddy. For example, boiling alive. Back to the epilogues now. After Jake falls into the ball pit, we cut to Millie being lost in these snowy woods, feeling incredibly cold and incredibly tired, although it doesn't feel like she's been out there that long. She is, however, lost, until a boy comes out from the woods to grab her by the hand and help her back to her grandfather's house. And once she sees it and sees her family happily celebrating inside, she runs in and is warmly welcomed home. And for the first time in what feels like a long time, she is happy. Cutting back to the real world, one of the grubby red plastic balls in the ball pit shines golden and then eventually becomes semi-transparent with a pastiche of this memory inside. One by one, the other balls in the ball pit start doing the same, turning gold and then semi-transparent with a memory inside. Not the same one as Millie's, just a memory. Until eventually the whole ball pit is shining. The story then cuts away. The book here is saying a lot, and it's implying even more. But from these implications, I believe the book here is saying that this ball pit harbors many lost souls trapped in purgatories made of their own memory. These spirits are trapped here by agony, wandering around cold and lost and unable to find peace. But Jake's last actions as the Stitch Wraith is to reach into each one of these memories and help those spirits to rest. They may not be moving on, but if they're stuck in these memories, at least make those memories a happy one. In the FNAF books, spirits and memory are incredibly closely tied, even sometimes being used interchangeably, and Remnant and Agony have been shown to be able to affect either of them. Pause. If you haven't read the books or it's been a while, I'm throwing out a lot of terminology here. What is Remnant and Agony? The books very rarely specify information about Remnant or Agony, but lucky for us in the epilogues there are 2 scientists, one studying Agony and the other studying Remnant, and from them we get their perspective on what these things are. Agony is stated to be the energy of the most negative emotion a human can experience, agony. It's nearly undetectable and hard to measure, but typically when something incredibly horrible happens, a nearby object becomes infected with the agony of that event. That energy can be manipulated and used in various ways. Remnant, on the other hand, is slightly different because it's not the energy itself. Remnant is specified to be the combination of incredibly positive human emotion or spiritual energy or memory. Again, these are stated somewhat interchangeably at times, and metal. It is specifically the combination of that positive energy and metal in physical form. That is Remnant. Remnant is what William Afton was studying in the game's timeline, where it can be melted down and manipulated, and he likely did that using the scooper in Sister Location Into the Fun Times. At least if the blueprints from Sister Location are to be believed. Well, we get the blueprints in FNAF 6, but they're of Sister Location. Nuance. Remnant and Agony both have various abilities that don't necessarily interact. Agony is at times able to manifest in dark tendrils and kill people in an instant. Meanwhile, Remnant has been shown to be able to heal. Even just scraping some Remnant off on someone in the hospital dramatically increases their health. But both Remnant and Agony can manipulate memory. We get clear examples of both of these things happening. You could argue what Jake does in the ball pit is Remnant, but for a more direct example, earlier in the epilogues, Jake encounters a depressed homeless man and reaches out to him. He's able to, in the homeless man's memory, find a positive, happy memory and strengthen it and make it larger in his mind. And in the real world, the man is much happier afterwards. An equal but opposite example can be seen with Agony. During the final fight between Detective Larson, the Stitch Wraith, and Eleanor, Eleanor tries to neutralize the detective so she can prey on the others. And to do this, she traps Detective Larson in his own mind by implanting her memories of the horrible deeds she did onto him, at this point likely using Agony. Theoretically, he'd be there for a long time if it wasn't for his own ingenuity. Within those memories, he finds ways to either escape or defeat Eleanor, and then escape that respective memory until eventually he comes back too, because when this was happening, he essentially blacked out. I think you might be able to start seeing the pieces come together here, because I think all of this is establishing a precedent. The books clearly show us that the spirits and memories of people in this franchise are trapped in this ball pit, and the books give us examples on how Agony can manipulate memories to keep people trapped within them. Even further, we have examples in the books of Remnant being used to make memories better and happier. Even further, we have examples in the book of when you're within someone else's memory, you can make changes and affect that environment to help that person escape that memory. So is this what Oswald is doing? Traveling through the memories of the missing child incident victims to help them? Possibly. But to solidify that argument, I think we would need to explain two key issues here if this is not in fact time travel. What is the Yellow Rabbit, and how does the past keep affecting the present? The Yellow Rabbit is actually a big spot of misunderstanding for a lot of casual and newer FNAF fans, and I don't blame you at all, because it can be very confusing going into this series. But this is not Springtrap, and a lot of folks understandably make that mistake, because it's a Yellow Rabbit, that's the guy. But Springtrap is specifically William Afton, dead inside of a Springlock activated Spring Bonnie suit, who has rotted and decayed over some years until eventually he, as that person, possesses and pilots the full suit. It's essentially a walking corpse. Whereas this thing, although very organic looking, has no William Afton inside it, and the suit itself is still in fairly good condition. It has not decayed yet. The game refers to it officially as the Yellow Rabbit, and this thing is barely human. It's almost closer to an animal. So if it's not Springtrap, what is the Yellow Rabbit? What do we know about it? Well, in the original story, it's definitely a physical suit at the least, and it seems to be so in the game as well. After all, the good ending sees it being hung in the netting and trapped until it eventually gives way. And even after this thing apparently dies in the ropes, it is visible and present, pulling on the ropes. Oswald, Oswald's father, and Jeff in the 2-star ending can visually see this suit, which tells me it is a physical suit. Not to mention, in the final fight, it manages to bite Oswald on the arm, and that bite remains there after it dies. If this was an illusion or a ghost or something, that bite shouldn't remain, but it does. So if it is a physical suit, what's going on here? Well, I believe that it's infected with Agony. Now, this is often just speculation based on how it acts and what it's capable of, but I think the game actually gives us some really solid evidence to this theory. In the 2-star ending, when Jeff encounters the suit after it's been defeated, it has black tears streaming from its eyes. Meanwhile, in the books, whenever someone is killed with Agony, they have black tears streaming down their eyes. Agony, when it manifests, often is shown as a viscous black liquid. So that evidence, paired with how the Yellow Rabbit acts and functions, makes for a pretty strong argument that this is an Agony-infested Spring Bonnie suit. So then the question is, whose Agony is infecting it? Well, I mentioned earlier that in the books there's a scientist studying the effects of Agony. he learns that you can take agony from multiple sources and add it to one object. This is actually how he creates the Stitch Wraith. He lines up several objects that are less infected with agony to more infected, and he's created a machine that forces the agony from one object into another, something that it can do on its own, but he's speeding up that process until eventually all of the agony is collected into the body of the Stitch Wraith. So I think a similar thing is happening here. The books imply, and the scientist nearly directly states, that agony can be harvested, collected, amplified, and rally around a single consciousness. If this ball pit is filled with the agony of the victims of the missing child incident, that would likely coalesce into the suit that killed them. Not to mention, if all of them were killed by William Afton wearing this suit, then it would be a nearby object for their agony to infect during the event of the missing child incident. But I don't think just their agony is inside this suit. After all, it's acting a lot like William Afton. So is William Afton's agony in this suit as well? I believe so, but if that's true, am I saying that he died in the suit? Well, it doesn't appear so, at least not yet. When William Afton dies in the Springlock suit, his body is affixed to that thing. It's placed in the secret safe room that every Freddy's has and sealed away. But this suit is in generally pretty good condition, and I don't see any corpses inside of it, which leads me to believe that William Afton hasn't died in this suit, at least not yet. But if that's the case, why is William Afton's agony here? Well, truth be told, I don't have an amazing reason for that. Maybe he's just that evil. Maybe he did something else to experience agony during it. I mean, in the Silver Eyes, William suffers a Springlock incident before he dies. He has scars all over his body. So maybe that's where his agony comes from. It's not clear. But for as little of a reason as I have a lot of evidence to suggest this is the case. For one thing, it's doing the things that William did, which would make sense if William's agony is piloting the creature. I also believe the reason it appears so monstrous and organic and scary is because this is how it looked like to the children just before they were killed, a monster. Not to mention, although this thing doesn't speak that often, it does speak, and when it does, it sounds very William. It may have been hard to hear some of the lines in game, but if you go through the files, they're labeled, and you can see them right here. And this is very William. And finally, the photo that gives you the good ending in this game. It's a photo of William and Henry, and for some reason, even in the middle of combat, this photo is so important to the yellow rabbit that it stops what it's doing, looks at it, and freaks out for a moment, as if that memory triggered something deep inside of it. So that to me says it's either William or Henry, and I don't think it's Henry. So it makes the most sense in my eyes that this suit is infested with the agony of the missing child incident victims and controlled by the agony of William Afton. So then the question becomes, if it's just a physical suit infected with agony, how does it replace our father and make everyone else see it as human? Well, I don't think it actually does. Something to keep in mind is that the only humans we ever see enter this ball pit are Oswald and his father. Agony can do a lot of things, and it's even speculated that agony can change the appearance of someone. Eleanor does this in the books, although it is implied that the reason she's able to do that is the remnant locket. It's never... The issue with what remnant and agony can do in these books is a lot of people that do these things have both remnant and agony. So it's hard to ascribe what does what. But even if agony is able to change your appearance, it changes it for everybody. Eleanor looks that way for everybody. So it seems like agony can only affect things that it has already come into contact with. Or in other words, if I am a creature infested with agony, I may be able to change my appearance, but everyone would see me in that new way. Or if I touch someone, I can make them see something, but only the person I've touched. So, Into the Pit, if everyone sees Oswald's father as Oswald's father, except for Oswald who sees the yellow rabbit, what seems more likely? The yellow rabbit is able to, at range, make everybody else see it as a human using agony, but for whatever reason, it makes Oswald specifically see it as the yellow rabbit? Or the thing that leaves the ball pit and drives Oswald home is Oswald's father, physically, and everyone else who has not been infected with this agony sees Oswald's father physically. But due to being exposed to the agony that him and his father have just been, Oswald sees the yellow rabbit, the real consciousness behind his father's actions. I think that second option is more likely, but if that's true, then we would probably need evidence that Oswald is seeing things that aren't really there. But does that happen in the game? So yeah, as always, we cannot trust the point of view of our main character in a FNAF game, because they might not be seeing what's actually there. If agony is affecting Oswald's vision in these moments, who's to say it's not happening elsewhere? Like when the past is affecting the present. Sure, in the past the yellow rabbit destroys these doors, and in the present they're no longer there. But is that really the case, or is this another hallucination due to Oswald's exposure to agony, just like the yellow rabbit in his home? I think it is. So we've been prepping these ingredients and mixing them together, but I think it's time to put it into the oven and see what kind of horrors rise. This, in my theory and opinion, is the true, full story of what's actually happening in Into the Pit. In 1985, 6 children were killed by William Afton wearing the Spring Bonnie suit, and for some reason after doing this, he hides the physical suit in the ball pit before fleeing the scene. When Fazbear gets there and sees this gruesome sight, they wall off the party room, pretending as though it never happened, and try to sell the place as fast as possible. Those spirits, however, know that it happened, and they are trapped there, their agony preventing their spirits from moving on, keeping them stuck in an endless purgatory of their memory of that day, the best and worst day of their life, endlessly repeating. Looking for the cause of this, the agony attached to that physical Spring Bonnie suit seeps out and affects the rest of the ball pit, and over time the entire ball pit is infected with their agony, their pain, and their memory. Some years later, Oswald enters that ball pit and hides deep inside of it. Being surrounded by all of that spiritual energy and agony, they reach out to Oswald, and he finds himself in their memory of that day. At first, he's having a wonderful day at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, until he sees the reason they're trapped there, and he sees them dead on the ground. The horrible acts done by the yellow rabbit. He tries to escape and manages to get back out of the ball pit, but that agony doesn't want to let him go yet. It takes control of the physical suit and tries to grab for them, managing to get Oswald's father and dragging him into the pit. Oswald reaches in and pulls his father back out, but being exposed to that physical suit changed him. His father is taken over by the agony of the yellow rabbit. Oswald sees him for what he really is and knows that at least mentally, his father is still in that pit. So night after night, Oswald sneaks off back to Jeff's Pizza to go back into the ball pit and searches through the memories of those victims to look for his father, and in doing so finds the victims trapped in their own purgatories. One by one, Oswald frees the victims that are trapped in their memories, releasing their spirits and having them find peace. And each time when their agony resolves, the yellow rabbit gets just a little bit weaker. Parts of the energy manifesting this monster dissipating as each victim is laid to rest. But over time, the exposure to this agony starts affecting Oswald more and more, giving him more visceral hallucinations during the day, starting at just flashes and ending with full-blown panic attacks. But eventually, in that spiritual realm, he finds his father, and the two of them manage to get back out through the ball pit, fighting off the weakened yellow rabbit. Then, in the real world, the possessed suit makes one last-ditch attempt to get Oswald or his father, but Oswald is able to fight him back, and the suit gets tangled in the ropes as the last of its agony melts away from it, until all that's left is an empty suit hanging above the ball pit. Oswald and his father reconcile and leave that place. So that's my theory. We're not traveling through time, but instead visiting the memories of the spirits still trapped at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and helping them find peace. At least, I think there's a lot more evidence to suggest this than literal time travel. But that's my take. What do you think is actually going on in this game? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Y'all better be respectful because we're talking about FNAF books today. Specifically, we're going to try and decide definitively whether or not the books are part of the game's timeline, because we're talking about Into the Pit, the game that came out recently that's directly based off of the first short story from Fazbear Frights, Into the Pit. But if you want to flame me after today's video, don't do it on Twitter. I'm not really on there anymore, especially after recent events. Feel free to flame me on Blue Sky though. My username's right here, just Brytoast. Also, go follow me if you're over there. It's way better than Twitter. And while we're on topic, this is a little late, but I make these in advance. I just want to be very clear after some recent events. This community will always be a welcoming space for the left, the LGBT, people of color, women, pretty much everyone that the far right hates. And my advice to my US audience that is in that category right now, remember to love yourself and those around you. The one thing they can't stand is us loving our authentic selves. And to quote Justin McElroy, I'm going to wake up and keep trying to do good, and no one gets to vote on that. Anyway, Five Nights at Freddy's. Slices, put on your aprons and let's bake ourselves a theory. So what is this whole FNAF book debate about? Well, there are currently 4 series of FNAF books out there: The Silver Eyes, Fazbear Frights, Tales from the Pizzaplex, and the new interactive novels. But if you release this many books based on your games, a question naturally presents itself. Are these books in-timeline stories that actually happen, or are they spin-off side stories that could take place in your universe but didn't actually happen? For Five Nights at Freddy's, this answer seems to change depending on what series of books we're talking about. The first series, the Silver Eyes novel trilogy, everyone pretty much definitively agrees cannot take place within the game's timeline. This is a separate alternate universe. After all, in these books, Henry Emily, the co-founder of Freddy's, creates a robotic replica of his daughter Charlotte Emily after William Afton kills her. This theoretically could happen in-game, but the issue presents itself when Henry takes his life soon after. Meanwhile, Henry Emily is alive up until FNAF 6 because he creates FNAF 6. Not to mention other inconsistencies, like the fact that in the games, William Afton dies in a springlock suit in a back room surrounded by ghosts. But in the books, that robotic Charlotte Emily triggers the springlock suit that William is wearing in front of a group of people. It's a completely different scenario. These events do not line up and are in fact contradictory enough that the books cannot take place within the game's timeline. But these stories are still useful for lore because of the universe they're set in. For example, William Afton experiments with Remnant, the material that's a combination of spirit and metal, and we learn a lot about it through his experiments. Even though these exact experiments didn't take place in the games, the fact that they take place in the same universe implies this is how Remnant works in the games. Just additional information for the lore finders. Nothing you need to understand the games, but nice touches. Moving on to the interactive novels, these books are similarly definitively one way or the other on this debate, but unlike The Silver Eyes, it's the opposite category. Now granted, only 2 books of this interactive novel series are out so far, but both of them, VIP and The Week Before, seem to definitively take place within the game's timeline. All the lore that they've presented so far is not contradictory, and in fact can bridge some gaps between Tales from the Pizzaplex and the games, but The Week Before is so straight up FNAF 1 it's not even funny, to the point where the back of the book even directly states it is a prequel to FNAF 1, and it describes many locations and animatronics one for one. And probably the most important thing for this debate, all the lore that these books have presented are not contradictory. They're instead supplementary. They give us more information on things we already knew about and help to flesh out a more colorful picture of the lore. I'm not kidding when I say The Week Before is possibly not only the most lore-packed book in the series, but the best one. If you have not read The Week Before, I cannot recommend it enough. The ambiguity of this debate begins to appear when we move on to the short stories collections. And we'll start with Tales from the Pizzaplex. If you haven't noticed it yet, I'm not like sick, but my allergies have been acting up fierce, and I'm sure you can hear it in my voice. Tales of the Pizzaplex are the series of short stories that came out just before the interactive novels and all take place within the security breach era of FNAF. You know, they're Tales from the Pizzaplex, it's pretty self-explanatory. But the question on whether or not these stories take place within the game's timeline is actually a lot more mixed within the community. On the surface, all in all, I think I personally lean to these stories taking place within the game's continuity as of now. Many, if not most of the short stories are actually completely disconnected from the game timeline, and instead give us more information about this Pizzaplex and other associated Pizzaplexes. It helps to flesh out the world, not directly contradict anything. Meanwhile, all the game timeline relevant lore that the books do present don't seem to conflict with much because it's all focused around the Mimic, the antagonist from Security Breach Ruin, and possibly Security Breach, and possibly Help Wanted, and possibly Help Wanted 2, and possibly Special Delivery, and hell, possibly showing up in FNAF 2. It's a whole thing. But regardless, right now the games tell us barely anything about the Mimic. A lot of it is still yet to be revealed. So because of that, most of the information we get about the Mimic from the books is not inherently contradictory. So at least until Secret of the Mimic, I think it's safe to assume these books are in continuity. And who knows, maybe Secret of the Mimic will come out and tell us that Henry created the Mimic in the game's timeline, which will then X all of the Tales in the Pizzaplex books from the timeline. But until we get a confirmation either way from that, I think it's safe to assume that these books are in continuity. So now the series of books I saved for last and the main topic of today's video, Fazbear Frights. The series of books where I believe a majority of the book canonicity debate takes place. And look, I'm gonna mess this up, I know I will. Scott has stated before that all FNAF media is canon, but not all FNAF media is within the same continuity. I'm going to mix up those words. They mean different things. Canon means official, canonicity means in the same story. Give me a little bit of grace. This video is very long, the script is 4,000 words. I may accidentally say canon when I mean to say in continuity. That's what we're arguing today. Are the Fazbear Frights stories in continuity? So if I slip up and say canon, just know that that's what I mean. The short stories in these books swing wildly in a lot of directions. You can get anything from Fazbear branded sea monkeys that possibly end the world to a girl whose body is slowly replaced with garbage. Some of these stories, Freddy's is barely mentioned. In fact, I'd argue like half of the stories, Freddy's is maybe in the background. It's sort of a modern day Goosebumps with Freddy's as this looming dark miasma over the entire scenario, rather than an active presence, which I think is a really cool idea. But similar to Tales from the Pizzaplex, the epilogues are where the major story and lore implications come from, some of which is directly seen in the games in some way. So then the question becomes, are these books within the game's timeline? And I do want to be clear here before we get into the weeds of this debate, and that's to differentiate on theories about these books. Whenever Fazbear Frights is brought up in the theory space, there's typically three ways of thinking about the books that I've seen: Frights games, Frights fiction, and Stitchline games. Frights games is the theory that every single Fazbear Frights story and the epilogues take place within the game's timeline. I tend to disagree with this theory because, like I mentioned, again, just sea bonnies alone would have possibly ended the world, and that's not the only story that has world-ending implications. So I think it's safe to say that that theory is kind of bunk. There's Frights fiction, which purports that these stories exist within the game's timeline as merchandise that Fazbear themselves sells. We know that Fazbear is trying to make light of the situation and make fun of itself, so it's not impossible, but I've yet to see compelling evidence for this theory. It's kind of just a posited hypothesis. And finally, Stitchline games. This is the theory that purports just the epilogues and its associated stories are the things that appear in the game's timeline. This wraps up fairly neatly, because the epilogue does mention several stories of Fazbear Frights. Some of the main characters of the epilogues have their start in a Fazbear Frights story, and coincidentally, all of the world-ending implication stories are not in this list. So if any of these are possible, I think Stitchline games is the most likely. But the question is Stitchline games true? And we'll get there, but just for the record, Stitchline comes from the word Stitchwraith timeline, because the Stitchwraith is basically the main character of the epilogues, so the timeline of the Stitchwraith being in the games. Stitchline games. Well, for much of the history of FNAF, the fandom was pretty split on this decision, because these stories have a lot of strange details that on the surface feel weird to fit into a timeline, and the whole story is kind of wild. So many fans, if not most fans, just went, well, it's in the books, so who cares? It's probably not in continuity. After all, they're never referenced in games, so why should we bother? And like, that's a little dismissive, but it's not an unfair argument. But now we have a game called Into the Pit, and it's directly based off of the first Fazbear Frights story, Into the Pit, which is one of the associated stories of the Stitchwraith epilogues, if not one of the more important ones, because that ball pit is featured front and center, especially at the end of the epilogues. Not to mention, soon we'll have Return to the Pit, an interactive novel also based off of Into the Pit. And so far, the first two interactive novels were directly in the game's timeline. So now there's really no valid reason to outright dismiss Stitchline games. So we'll have to use the old-fashioned way to figure out if this theory is true. Actually theorize about it. The most logical way I can think of to solve this question is to compare what the Fazbear Frights story tells us about the game's timeline and what we know about that series of events from the games directly, and see if any of their lore contradicts. It's how we know that the Silver Eyes is not in continuity, because it goes directly against what the games tell us. So we'll do the same thing for Fazbear Frights, which means I finally got to do it. This is a slightly abridged, but mostly all-encompassing retelling of the Fazbear Frights epilogues and what associated stories get pulled in. Starting with one of the associated stories, The Man in Room 1280. Soon after the FNAF 6 fire, paramedics investigating the scene find the burnt, should-be-dead but somehow alive corpse of William Afton. The suit must have melted off him or something, because they just bring the body to the hospital. While at the hospital, the nurses try to put him out of his misery, but they can't even seem to kill him. Their supreme extremely creeped out by his presence. Anytime they try to kill him, they say this small boy's spirit with an alligator mask and curly black hair prevent them. We learn later that this spirit is named Andrew. While they monitor the body, it also shows that there are two consciousnesses within William Afton's brain. Eventually, a priest gets through to the corpse, and the corpse asks for a Fazbear distribution warehouse. The priest brings him there, and once there, William Afton's body convulses and explodes into a black goop all over the surrounding technology. That black goop is made out of William Afton's agony, and it infects everything it landed on. In these stories, it's explained that agony is the energy created when humans feel the worst possible emotion, agony. It's further explained that when a supremely tragic event takes place, nearby objects can be infected with the agony of what happened. That energy can possess things and manifest in different ways if controlled with a consciousness. These objects that were infected make up the majority of the associated stories I was talking about earlier, where, for example, in one of the stories, a robot dog who is supposed to sync up to your phone and give you information begins going too far, violently retrieving every whim that this boy thinks of. That dog is doing that because William Afton's agony infected it. But not just William Afton infected these objects. Eventually, that dog, Fetch, is collected by Phineas Taggart, who's been studying the effects of agony and trying to utilize the energy. Much of what we know about agony comes from his studies. In an experiment, he takes the agony from several objects and, using a machine, filters them into an endoskeleton. And once sufficiently agonized, he takes the battery from that Fetch dog animatronic and places it in the chest of the endoskeleton. He then takes the mask of a creepy doll and puts it on the endoskeleton's head, trying to give it a sort of consciousness. This works, and it stands up and reaches out to touch Phineas. When it does, he instantly dies, shrivels up, and cries black blood. Sometime after, we actually get the point of view of this endoskeleton, and it's noted that two spirits are dwelling within it, one from the mask and one from the battery. The one from the mask, Jake, can control the endoskeleton and look around the environment. The one from the battery, Andrew, cannot see or hear anything from the outside world or control the endoskeleton. But it's his agony that the boys assume is the reason why when they touch people, they instantly die. It's never said definitively, but it's heavily implied a few times that it's actually William Afton's agony that's causing that, as both William and Andrew's consciousnesses were in the body that exploded. Jake resolves that they have to collect all of the other infected items and destroy them so no one else gets hurt. They do this for a while, and as they do, Jake learns that Andrew can't move on, likely until all of the objects are collected, as he himself is shattered among them. When it's fully completed, they try to use a trash compactor to destroy all of the objects, themselves included, and jump in. But it's in that moment that it's revealed all they've done is gather all of Afton's agony in one location, and his will begins to take over that pile of trash. It's in this moment that Andrew actually seems to move on, and Jake, still remaining in the endoskeleton, gets ejected from the pile. There's also a couple characters that have been doing stuff in the background that I'll introduce now. Detective Larson had been looking into the incidents going on in these short stories, and he ends up at this factory in this moment with a broken puppet mask. That broken puppet mask is reaching out to Larson, begging it to be thrown into the pile. There's also a robotic girl named Eleanor, who is definitely evil, but we have no definitive origin. We don't know where it came from, but it's also been trying to collect the pieces of Afton, and in this moment, it joins the trash heap. There's a bit of a fight, but eventually Detective Larson is able to use a forklift to push the amalgamation into a nearby lake, while getting the puppet mask inside of it. And once done, the puppet's will begins to overtake the trash heap, and forces it to rip itself apart, dismantling it and sinking into the bottom of the lake. Eleanor manages to sneak off before it's destroyed. After the fight, Detective Larson is unconscious, and Jake realizes something much more nefarious than Afton was powering that thing, and it's still out there, so he sets out to find it. Eventually, he finds a homeless girl who calls herself Renelle, and she says that she's estranged from her father, asking for Jake's help, to which he obliges, and brings her to her father's home. They arrive at Dr. Talbert's house, a man who is studying Remnant, the combination of metal and spirit. It's in this moment as well that Detective Larson shows up, trying to follow up on some information about Remnant. And in that moment, Renelle reveals herself to actually be Eleanor in disguise, and another fight happens. But by the end of it, Jake is able to tackle and burn away at Eleanor's body, meanwhile going through her memories and throwing her consciousness into her most miserable one. She is gone and defeated, and a while later, Jake's barely functioning endoskeleton wanders to a ball pit in an abandoned pizzeria and falls in. Once he does, he begins to see the memories of several of the victims of the Fazbear Frights stories, and one by one, he reaches out to them, helps them to find peace, and rest. Yeah, that's a crazy buck-wild story, but the main importance of it is that it involves taking William Afton's body out of the FNAF 6 location, exploding his body, and then destroying the technology that his body exploded onto. Like, it is the most definitive way to kill a guy ever. So all of the events of these books seem to take place after FNAF 6 Ultimate Custom Night and before Help Wanted Security Breach. It even explains what Ultimate Custom Night is. After all, Andrew was in William Afton's mind, and he says he hated him so much that he wanted to keep him alive to torment him, which feels like an Ultimate Custom Night thing. And you guessed it, the strongest connection to this story being involved in the games is Into the Pit, because that ball pit that he falls into at the end is the very same ball pit from Into the Pit. So if this is what the books are presenting, what do the games tell us happened between FNAF 6 Ultimate Custom Night and Help Wanted Security Breach? And are there any major contradictions? Well, the games tell us nothing. I've complained about this before, but from the perspective of a fan who is only playing currently available games, there's literally no explanation to what happens between FNAF 6 and Security Breach. For all you know, William Afton dies and is stuck in Ultimate Custom Night, and then suddenly, at the end of Security Breach, FNAF 6 is in the basement, and it's never explained why. On the surface, this all seems perfect. Like, okay, there's no issues. This whole story can slot right into this big gap in the plotline of the games, and we can just move on. It doesn't affect anything too drastically, you can still understand the games without it, but if you really want to know the nitty-gritty of the timeline, then you'll have to read the books. Well, not quite. There is one issue I see, and that's Andrew being the one who does Ultimate Custom Night. If Stitchline Games is true, then like I mentioned, Andrew would be the one creating and manipulating Ultimate Custom Night. After all, in the story, Andrew says that he was in William Afton's body trying to keep him alive to torture him because he hated him that much. And when they scanned his mind, they literally saw two consciousnesses. Frankly, Andrew being the one behind Ultimate Custom Night doesn't make a lot of sense with the information we have from the games. First of all, who is Andrew? Literally who? We nearly definitively know 4 of the names of the missing child incident victims, especially with the week before confirming Susie and Jeremy, comparing it to the FNAF 6 graves. And the security logbook, I believe, seems to imply that 5th victim was named Cassidy. Now, to be fair, Into the Pit does give us a possible way out here if Andrew is a missing child incident victim, and that is that it doubled down on there being 6 victims in the MCI. The book initially said this, but it said half a dozen, so a lot of people were like, is this a rounding situation? Is this an estimation? But then the games show us what seem to be 6 silhouettes, and then in the hat minigame, there are the 5 hats you collect, and then you go out of bounds to collect a secret 6th hat, a 6th victim. But if that's true, is he Golden Freddy? This matters because Ultimate Custom Night seems to imply that Golden Freddy's spirit is the one creating Ultimate Custom Night. After all, the spirit creating Ultimate Custom Night several times mentions that we're gonna be here forever, you and me, I'm keeping you here, we're never moving on, forever and ever, it's just us. And then what is the final unlock that you can get at the very end of Ultimate Custom Night if you beat everything? It's Golden Freddy's suit twitching and fading into the distance, as if going on endlessly. To me, this seems pretty direct, and again, nothing here is confirmed, but to me it seems like this is pretty directly stating that Golden Freddy's spirit is the one keeping him here. So if that's true, would Andrew be in Golden Freddy? A lot of people, myself included, leaned on that being true. Especially in another story, The New Kid, someone looks into the old Fredbear suit and swears they see curly black hair, just like what is described Andrew as having. However, Into the Pit giveth, and Into the Pit taketh away. In Into the Pit, the game, there are several minigames that refer to other Fazbear Frights stories. 3 very important ones, to be fair. To Be Beautiful, which features Eleanor, Count the Ways, which features the first victim that Jake helps in the ball pit, and Fetch, the dog whose battery is put in the Stitch Wraith, which puts Andrew in the Stitch Wraith. So it can be assumed that much of Andrew's consciousness ended up in Fetch. Now, in case you've never read the Fazbear Frights story Fetch, you're in luck, because on Right Doze, my 3rd channel, actually just released an audiobook reading of the whole thing. So if you don't want to read it or don't have access to it and prefer audiobooks, you can listen to the full thing right there. But briefly, for the purposes of this video, a couple of kids break into an old Freddy's and find an animatronic dog, like I mentioned. It's supposed to sync up with your phone and give you the information you want. But because this dog is possessed, basically anytime our main character wants anything and verbalizes that through somebody, Fetch menacingly and violently gets it for him. Like a dog attacks him on the way home and he texts his friend, "That crazy dog almost got me." And the next morning, that dog's brutalized corpse is on his porch. Fetch got it for him. So if that's the story, what's the minigame? Because Count the Ways is abstract but fairly accurate to the story, and To Be Beautiful is abstract but fairly accurate to the story, while Fetch is completely different. In the Fetch minigame, we collect 6 balloons, present it to Fetch, presumably win Fetch, and then it immediately kills us. Doesn't happen in the story at all. In fact, our main character's life isn't in danger. He's trying to prevent other people from getting hurt. So the minigame isn't super accurate, but it's important regardless, because Fetch is in it and he kills someone, which implies that Fetch is possessed in this moment. And if Fetch is possessed, it's possessed by Andrew's consciousness to an extent. And if that's true, then Andrew is in this dog. And that's important because Golden Freddy is in the same minigame, and Golden Freddy's eyes light up when you walk away. They didn't need to put Golden Freddy in this minigame. They didn't need to make a Fetch minigame, but they made a minigame, Golden Freddy and Fetch being the only 2 animatronics in here, and they're both possessed at the same time. So either Andrew's consciousness is both in Fetch and Golden Freddy doing 2 completely separate things, which doesn't seem likely because Golden Freddy seemingly wasn't at the factory, and it definitely wasn't in the trash heap because someone would have mentioned that, or Andrew can't be in Golden Freddy, and likewise wouldn't be the one doing Ultimate Custom Night. Thus, bringing us back to the title of this video. Into the Pit, the game, provides us the best evidence and most conclusive evidence we've ever had that the Stitch Wraith Stingers are within the game's timeline, and simultaneously gives us a damning piece of evidence to go against it. And because of that, it's still a toss-up on whether you think this theory is true, which is really important for the rest of the franchise. Honestly, you have to make an assumption either way. Either the Stitch Wraith stories are within the game's timeline, Andrew is doing Ultimate Custom Night, and this Golden Freddy cutscene has to mean something else, or the Stitch Wraith Stingers are in the game's timeline, and Andrew is in Golden Freddy at the same time as Fetch and is doing Ultimate Custom Night from Golden Freddy, or the Stitch Wraith Stingers are not in the game's timeline, and we have our first fully fleshed out game that is in its own separate timeline from the other games, which is a crazy precedent to set. And like I mentioned, this is a very important distinction to make, because if Stitchline Games is true, then that would mean that this corpse is not William Afton. William Afton's corpse is gone. This definitively cannot be William Afton if the Fazbear Frights epilogues are in the game's timeline. So this theory determines this 1-to-1. At the end of the day, no one has the answers for this, and Scott sure as hell won't tell us. Me personally, I still lean towards Golden Freddy being the spirit who is doing Ultimate Custom Night to William Afton. And because of that, I think that Golden Freddy's spirit is Cassidy, as the security logbook implies, which goes against Stitchline Games, which currently means I believe that the Into the Pit game is a separate series of games, like how the Silver Eyes is a separate series of books. But honestly, it's still kind of foggy, and any more definitive evidence in anywhere of this part of the timeline would be appreciated, and I'm sure my opinion will change a couple weeks from now. But what do you think? I would honestly love to hear your thoughts on this debate in the comments below, respectfully. If you want to be mean, you at least gotta follow me on Blue Sky. Five Nights at Freddy's has a new book series. They ventured into the literary world going on like 8 years ago, so it's no surprise that there's a new FNAF book. But this new series, unlike all the ones that came before it, doesn't have like a catchy title or anything. We had the Silver Eyes trilogy, then we had Fazbear Frights, then Tales from the Pizzaplex, but for these, all we have is interactive novel, which feels kind of clinical, but it's the only title that carries through for all the stories, so we'll take what we can get. But this series has been some of the most impactful books ever released for this franchise. The first one, VIP, was a shorter example of what the series is, but it gave us a lot of information between Tales from the Pizzaplex and Security Breach, bridging that gap from the books to the games. The next one we got was the week before, one of the best books we've ever gotten for this franchise, and it gave us so much in-depth lore on the context for FNAF 1, answering questions we've had since the beginning of the franchise, including Phone Guy's name. And now, for the third novel we've gotten so far in this incredible series, we have the earth-shattering revelation, it's just Into the Pit. Again, the slices put on your aprons. Let's bake ourselves a theory. So what is Return to the Pit? Well, it's proof that Into the Pit is Scott's favorite child. This is now the third time he's chosen to tell this story. First, it was the original Fazbear Frights short story, then we got the Mega Cat Studios produced game, and now we have this interactive novel, all telling the same story. But unfortunately for our brains and sanity, even though it's the same story 3 times, each of them is meaningfully different from each other. Things change each time. So we should go over what actually happens in this book, because when I tell you there are some crazy insane lore revelations, I'm not exaggerating. That being said, it's a little tricky to summarize a choose-your-own-adventure novel. I mean, it's a choose-your-own-adventure novel. There's so many different ways this story can unfold. So I looked at this book and I tried to figure out how best to describe it to you. To me, it made the most sense to split this book into 3 main storylines. Sure, there are countless choices you can make within each storyline, but for the most part, most of those choices either bring you eventually back to the main plot or kill you. So there's 3 end states that you can get to. So moving forward, I'm going to refer to them as the Canon playthrough, the Secret playthrough, and the Avengers playthrough. And yes, those are the best descriptors I can give each plotline, I'm not kidding. But we'll start with the Canon playthrough. All 3 stories start the same. You are Oswald, and you and your lower class family are stuck in this dying town. Over this summer, your dad doesn't want you alone at home all day, so he brings you to the library on his way to work. And about halfway through the day, you go from the library to Jeff's Pizza for a slice to eat, and then you repeat. It's not a bad day, but it's the only thing you get to do every single day all summer, so it gets old very quickly. One day, while you're annoyed at your father, you find the abandoned ball pit in the back of Jeff's Pizza, and to get back at him, you decide to hide, so he'll have to come inside and look for you. But when Oswald goes into the ball pit, there's no bottom. He keeps going deeper and deeper. So deep, in fact, that he has to struggle to swim back up. And when he gets there, he's not in Jeff's Pizza anymore. Well, the building layout is mostly the same, but there's arcade games, playing children, the ball pit isn't abandoned anymore, and there's an animatronic band on stage. Looking around, Oswald finds out that this ball pit has sent him back to the 1985 Freddy Fazbear's Pizza that used to be in this very building. We then meet 2 kids, Chip and Mike, and become quick friends with them, spending the whole day playing arcade games and eating pizza, even though there's a creepy yellow rabbit suit that's staring at us in the back corner. Eventually, Oswald figures he should go home as his dad is probably getting worried, and he goes back into the ball pit, which is now a shallow, normal ball pit. He counts to 100 while laying underneath, and when he sits back up, he's back at Jeff's Pizza, noticing that in the current day, no time has passed at all. So after this resulting turn of events, Oswald spends the rest of his summer visiting that 1985 Freddy Fazbear's Pizza every single day, until the last day of summer, where when you enter the ball pit, he finds a screaming scene. Parents and children are running all over the place, frantically trying to get out as fast as they can. And in that moment, Oswald notices the yellow rabbit is beckoning him to follow. He does, and is led into a back room where he finds 5 dead children with party hats all on. He runs to escape and the yellow rabbit gives chase, and he gets back out through the ball pit, where his dad finds him and scolds him for hiding from him even though he was calling for Oswald. But in that moment, the yellow rabbit bursts out of the ball pit, grabbing his dad, and there's a fight. After some wrestling, his dad is in the ball pit somewhere unseen, and the yellow rabbit exits, grabbing Oswald, dragging him out of Jeff's Pizza into his father's car, and drives him home. Oswald is freaked out, so he runs up to his room and texts his mom that something's wrong with dad. And she gets back and assures him that his dad is fine, just in bed, and that he should get some rest since the first day of school's tomorrow. Oswald agrees and goes to bed. And in the morning, when he comes down for breakfast, he finds that instead of his dad, the yellow rabbit is sitting at the other end of the table, his mom thinking that the yellow rabbit is his dad. It's in this moment that you can make a choice between 2 playthroughs, the Canon ending or the Avengers ending, fight or flight, or more accurately, play along or run away. But like I mentioned, we're going over the Canon playthrough, so you play along, pretending that it's your dad in front of mom and going to school. And while you're at school, you meet a new girl, Gabrielle, who's reading a book of Greek heroes, and that gives Oswald the courage to face the yellow rabbit. So after he goes home, he sneaks out and runs back to Jeff's Pizza. Searching in the ball pit, he finds his father, but in that moment, the yellow rabbit arrives. They struggle, and he manages to shove the yellow rabbit into the netting of the ball pit, and as it struggles in the netting, it ends up hanging itself, dying. And once it's dead, Oswald's dad wakes up, the two of them hug, make up with each other, and leave Jeff's Pizza. That should have all been pretty familiar at this point. Like I said, it's basically just the story of Into the Pit with a few minor changes. The same thing we've seen in Fazbear Frights and in the Mega Cat Studios game. But that was just the first playthrough, because during that playthrough, if you made specific choices, you would have found half of a Freddy Fazbear's token, and at this ending, you can find the other half outside of Jeff's Pizza. If you have both halves, the book instructs you to form it into one Freddy Fazbear's special token and restart your playthrough. This is how you access the secret playthrough. Starting over and making the same choices, upon entering the ball pit for the first time, Oswald encounters an arcade machine called 8-Bit Escape that's only playable with a special token. If you have this token on your second playthrough, you can start the game. When you do, you're whooshed into the game itself, finding yourself in a pixelated Freddy Fazbear's Pizza you yourself also pixels. If you try to leave the pizzeria, everything dissolves and you respawn at the beginning. If you die, you respawn at the beginning. The only way out is to beat the game. The game itself is the yellow rabbit in a pixelated form, kidnapping 5 missing children and putting party hats on them. To win, you have to find those children, take off their party hats, and not lead them out of the pizzeria, but to a party table to serve them cake. Once you do, the yellow rabbit starts convulsing until it eventually explodes. A blue winner appears and you're whooshed back out of the game. But you're not in 1985 Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. You're whooshed back into Jeff's Pizza. But not the Jeff's Pizza you know. It's been fully renovated, similar to the secret ending of Into the Pit, where now there's waiters, Jeff's happy, there's arcade machines, and the dining room is full, your family eating at Jeff's Pizza. And among the arcade cabinets is a framed newspaper article that says, "Kids saved from certain death, whole town rejoices," dated 1985. So in this playthrough, you prevented the missing child incident. But that's not the craziest part, because I saved one playthrough for last. The Avengers playthrough. Remember that fight or flight option at breakfast? This is what happens if Oswald chooses to fight. You can scream to your mom that that isn't your dad but a yellow rabbit, throw pancakes at him, and run out the front door. Once you get to the front lawn, you can choose to run all the way to Jeff's Pizza to go find your dad. Let's get this over with right away. But on the way to Jeff's Pizza, a car slams its brakes in front of you and a 40-year-old man shouts to get in. If you do, after talking with him for a bit, you realize that it's a 40-year-old Chip, our friend from the 1985 Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. He tells us a lot, and I don't know how to summarize this without sounding crazy, so I'm just going to quote the book directly. Oh, and I'll be skipping around, but there's a ... in the quote when I do skip. It's how you quote a book in literary terminology. Yeah, I mean, I didn't know about the ball pit, but a lot of weird stuff happened back in 1985, and there was some strange time-jumping stuff too. I didn't experience it personally, but it was kind of a crazy summer for us back then. An awful summer. Other people time-jumped, do you ask? A couple kids in my time went back. Don't know if it was in the ball pit or something else, but yeah, that rabbit's bad news. Trust me, we all know that. I totally believe it's done that, kidnapping your dad. Not the first time it's time-jumped either. No one's managed to destroy it. Oz, I've put together a team to take down the rabbit once and for all. We've been waiting for it to appear in town again, and well, it looks like it's now or never. We were meant to meet today. Will you join us and help us end it? So yeah, Chip is back, and he and a group of people who've been tormented by this franchise have gathered in this town to lie in wait for the yellow rabbit to appear again, to, I guess, beat it up. It's FNAF meets the Avengers meets the second part of It. Can't believe I said that sentence and I only know and enjoy one of those things. There's something wrong with me. But if we go with him, we find a barn filled with adults who are readying a plan and weapons. We also meet Gabrielle, who informs us that she's Chip's daughter. They just moved here for this plan, and we would have met her at school if we just went to school. But now that we're here, plans are turning to action, and the leader is going to come out to give a speech before they go. And when the leader shows up, it's the yellow rabbit. But only Oswald can see it. If we insist to everybody that it's the yellow rabbit, they call us crazy, put us in a room until the plan is over, and when the plan is over, the yellow rabbit comes and kills us. But if we confide in Gabrielle that it is the yellow rabbit and wait until later, the plan goes to fruition, and they all drive up to Jeff's Pizza. And honestly, it's a really funny scene. Quote, everyone barrels out of their cars and into Jeff's, weapons raised. We know you're in there, Chip calls out. You walk into the restaurant and see a very surprised Jeff standing behind his counter. He makes eye eye contact with you for a moment, and you don't know what to say. "Jeff, get into the kitchen," orders Chip. Jeff kind of just stands there in his usual kind of way. "Now," Chip turns and yells at him. That definitely sparks action in the pizza chef, and Jeff sprints into the kitchen. Crazy stuff. They start looking for the yellow rabbit, and you go looking for your dad. And you do find his boot in the ball pit, but a scream catches your attention and you stand up to look at what happened. The yellow rabbit finally started a counterattack and bit Chip's head nearly completely off. A fight ensues as they all now see the yellow rabbit where it's standing, and in that fight, one of the guns fires a stray bullet that hits Oswald in the chest, killing him. Yeah, like I said, the Avengers playthrough. It's crazy. But what does this tell us about the game's timeline? Because there's a lot of other stuff that happens in this book that I haven't even touched on. There is insane, earth-shattering lore if this book takes place within the game's timeline, but does it? So far, every interactive novel has been safe to assume that it takes place within the game's timeline. VIP was very closely related to Tales from the Pizzaplex and Security Breach, both things that many theorists assume are at least in part within the game's timeline. Obviously Security Breach, but I mean Tales from the Pizzaplex. And VIP takes effort to explain the inconsistencies of the Pizzaplex's design within Tales from the Pizzaplex and Security Breach. It serves as an excellent bridge between those continuities, and it doesn't directly contradict any of the lore that we know from the games. The week before, the next book in the series straight up has a cover description that describes it as a prequel to the first FNAF game. But more than that, it gives us insane amount of lore about the context of FNAF 1 that doesn't necessarily go against anything we know from the games directly, but informs us about the outside of the game that we never got to see. So far, every book in this series has been a part of the game's continuity, because it was only giving us additional information that we didn't have before that we didn't know about the games. I was going in to Return to the Pit, assuming this book would keep that tradition. Exterior knowledge that we didn't have before about a story that takes place within the game's continuity. But if Return to the Pit is meaningfully different or contradictory to the story of Into the Pit itself or anything we know from the game's timeline, then it can't be. So, is it? Well, there are a lot of tempting options and contradictions to choose from throughout this story, but most of them are within the non-chosen paths of the book. The problem with finding contradictions for a story in a choose-your-own-adventure novel is it's not showing us exactly what happened in the games. It's showing us what could have possibly happened in the games. So the only direct information we can use as a contradiction has to take place within the same choices that we see in-game. A perfect example is the whole Avengers storyline. Does that happen in Into the Pit? Hell no. It's not even close to happening. The thing about the Avengers playthrough is it only happens if Oswald chooses to throw pancakes at the yellow rabbit and leave immediately, which he doesn't do in Into the Pit. Gabrielle is still the new girl who just moved here in Into the Pit, and Chip lets us know that they just moved here to lie in wait for the rabbit. They wouldn't have stormed Jeff's if Chip never saw Oswald. So in Into the Pit, since Oswald doesn't leave his house and just goes to school, Chip never sees Oswald, so they would have never stormed the building. By the time Chip would have ever seen Oswald in Into the Pit, the yellow rabbit would have already been dealt with, and he could have told them that. So technically, the whole Avengers team could exist within Into the Pit, we just never get to see it, because by the time of the end of the story, the threat has been dealt with and we don't know what happens after that. If we want to see if Return to the Pit is canon to the Into the Pit game and game's continuity in general, we need to use the canon playthrough and see if there are any glaring, huge contradictions that we can point to. And all I could find after rereading this book and Into the Pit story and replaying the game is the missing children themselves. In the original Into the Pit story, the missing child incident victims are described as half a dozen kids. And for a while, there was kind of a joke that Scott just couldn't count. We had already known that the missing child incident was supposed to be 5 kids, so we saw that and went, oh, he thought he was rounding up. That's kind of silly. But then the graphic novel came out and doubled down, so some theorists started taking it seriously. And then the Into the Pit game came out and showed us an image of what looks like 6 kids, and doubled down with that with the arcade game where we collect 5 party hats, of which you can go off into a secret area and collect a secret 6th hat being dangled by the purple guy, or William Afton. So with all of this information, we started having to grapple with the fact that there's a possibility that there was a secret 6th victim of the missing child incident. Is it Charlie being lumped into the missing child incident? Is it Andrew? Is it someone we've never heard of? But then Return to the Pit comes out, and it says 5. It says 5 a few times. Not only does it say it in the initial moment, but later on in the story, Oswald is having us panic spiral and remembering what's going on, and he says 5 dead kids. So either Oswald is meant to be the 6th victim, Oswald Oswald never sees the sixth victim, or there isn't a sixth victim. And if so, this book is different from everything else we've seen from Into the Pit, and therefore breaks the continuity. So what do I think is going on here? My best guess is that this retelling is just that, a retelling. This isn't one-to-one with any iteration we've seen of the story so far. But before we get upset about that, what if it's on purpose? If we've gotten a Fazbear Frights version of Into the Pit and a Mega Cat Studios version of Into the Pit, and both of them are very similar, is it possible that this version of Into the Pit is distinct from both of those iterations because it is in continuity of the games? After all, VIP and The Week Before seemingly are definitively in continuity of the games, and they're perfected versions of their stories that give us so much more information that we've been lacking about those games. So is this the perfected version of Into the Pit that Scott wants to cement into the game's timeline as the exact story that he wanted to tell us? You put the rabbit ears on and feel stupid. Really, really stupid. Something sharp on each side of the plastic band, just by the top of your ears, suddenly pierces into your skull, clamping onto it hard. It's shocking and sudden. You should cry out in pain, but for some reason you actually feel quite relaxed. Really relaxed. It's like the stabbing into your flesh is a welcoming feeling, something you realize that you've always needed and now finally have. You feel good. You feel very bunny. You are one with being a bunny. Yes, this is right. This is good. God, I hope not. But what do you think? This is a wild story with a lot of wild implications. And frankly, we don't have any time to talk about the implications that this book can make on the timeline, because I had to spend a whole video explaining how weird this book is and that it might not even be a part of the timeline. But I'll probably make a couple videos talking about the grander points this book is trying to bring up. But I do want to make one thing very clear. As much as this book gives me a headache lore-wise, that's not to say that the quality of the book is bad. In fact, this is still a very, very good book and an incredibly fun read. I think it's probably my second favorite FNAF book next to The Week Before. If you have not picked up this book yet, which I think it came out like today or this week, it's been on Barnes & Noble shelves for a couple weeks now. I highly recommend buying and reading and playing through this book, even if you watch this video all the way through. I get it. In a franchise where some of the characters' names are literally just a keyboard smash, most mysterious is a tall claim. But when I say most mysterious, who do you think of? Because mysterious to me doesn't just mean lack of information. If we're talking about the characters we know the least about, that would probably be something like the Shadow animatronics. Or scratch that, specifically this Shadow guy. He's in FNAF World and he's just busting it down Fazbear style. We don't know anything about this guy besides the fact that he's based as hell. But when I think mysterious, I think of characters that we have a lot of questions for, but little answers. Those previous characters don't even give us a lot of questions to ask, like the Shadow animatronics. We don't know anything about them, so there really isn't a mystery, there's just a lack of information. But a character like Eleanor is filled with questions. Some of you, a lot of you even, may not even know who Eleanor is, but she is in the games as of Into the Pit. No, that's not Circus Baby. That's a different character. Eleanor is a character from Fazbear Frights, who's essentially the antagonist of the epilogues. But for as much screen time as she gets in the book, and as much information as we have about her, her whole existence is still a huge question mark. We're never told exactly who or what she is and where she came from. She just is. Or at least that was until some recent releases have shed some light on it. So Slices, put on your aprons and let's bake ourselves a theory. So what do we know about Eleanor? Well, she first appears in the story To Be Beautiful, the Fazbear Frights short story that this minigame is recreating. I have a full audiobook of this story on Right Doze, which you can find right here. But in case you don't want to watch that, here's the basic, super brief synopsis. A girl named Sarah is frustrated that she's not growing up as fast and wants to look prettier. One day she encounters a strange doll-like animatronic in the trunk of a car in a junkyard. She takes it out and cleans it up, and it springs to life, thanking her for cleaning it and saying it'll grant her one wish in return. Sarah wishes to be beautiful, the title of the story. And the animatronic, who introduces herself as Eleanor, gives Sarah a heart pendant and says if you wear this and never take it off, each day you'll wake up a little more beautiful. And true to her word, this works. Every night, Eleanor sings Sarah to sleep, and every day she wakes up a little more beautiful, becoming a bit taller, fuller, having her skin be less greasy, having her hair be better maintained. And this is all well and good until she trips and falls in the cafeteria, knocking her heart pendant off. She can't get it back on because the chain broke, and as she struggles, she starts deteriorating into garbage. Panicked, she runs back home and tries to find Eleanor to no avail. But in her garage, she finds that a locker was hiding several trash bags of her own body parts chopped up. up. It's revealed that every night Eleanor was chopping up and replacing parts of Sarah's body with garbage, using the pendant to make her look prettier instead, and, keep her alive and stuff. But as she's falling to pieces, Eleanor does arrive, takes the heart pendant from Sarah and puts it on herself. She then looks like Sarah used to look like, and thanks her for her help and leaves Sarah to die. Yeah, it's pretty menacing. She basically chops up and steals the identity of some helpless teenage girl. But I made the joke that she's just a tall circus baby, and is that true? Frankly, not quite, but I see the confusion. Here's how she's described in the story. Whatever it was beautiful. It had wide, green, long-eyed lashes, pink Cupid's bow lips, and pink circles on its cheeks. Its face was painted like a clown's, but a pretty clown. Its red hair was pulled up into twin pigtails on top of its head, and its body was sleek and silver, with a long neck, a tiny waist, and a rounded bust and hips. Its legs and arms were long, slender, and elegant. It looked like a robotic version of the gorgeous supermodels whose pictures hung on the walls of Sarah's room. We get later descriptions of Eleanor throughout the story as she's becoming more and more outwardly evil, but they all basically stem from this description, just looking more gaunt and scary. But yeah, the book basically describes her as a really hot, tall clown girl, and we're not going to get into what that's supposed to mean. But keep in mind those descriptors for later: a painted face, red pigtails, doll-like appearance, red cheeks and lips. But that's pretty much all the information we get about Eleanor directly. We don't get to know where it came from. We don't get to know what it's made out of. Frankly, Eleanor's appearance in this story doesn't even indicate it's related to Fazbear's at all. Sarah finds her in an abandoned car in a junkyard sticking out of the trunk, and even though she's the main antagonist of the epilogues, we don't get any more information about her origin in them. In the epilogues, the Stitchwraith, or this robot that's possessed by two different spirits, Jake and Andrew. Look, we're just gonna skip past a lot of the details. We're really talking about Eleanor here. You don't need to know how the Stitchwraith works for this theory, so we're just gonna move on. Is collecting all of the agony-possessed objects that are causing all of the terrible tragedies within Fazbear Frights. And once they're all in the same trash compactor, they turn it on and throw themselves inside, hoping to destroy all this misfortune and finally move on. But in that moment, Afton rears his ugly head. The agony they'd been collecting is from him, and now that it's all in one place, they essentially put him back together, and he begins to try to take control of this massive amalgamation. And it's in that moment that Eleanor shows up, winks at the boys, and jumps in as well. There's a struggle, and during this struggle, a detective shows up with the puppet's mask. Using that and a forklift, eventually Afton is defeated. But while he's sinking into the lake, Eleanor breaks free and sneaks off. Later on in the epilogues, the Stitchwraith, who is now only Jake because Andrew moved on, finds a homeless girl named Rennell, who asks the Stitchwraith to help her reunite with her father, Dr. Talbert. Jake agrees because he likes to help people, but little does he know, Rennell is actually Eleanor in another disguise, and once they get to Dr. Talbert, she reveals herself and attacks him, trying to capture all the remnant he'd been studying. But luckily, Jake and Detective Larson are able to fight back Eleanor and destroy her for good. So again, a lot of information about what Eleanor is capable of, and that she's probably based on agony because she's seeking it out, but she also probably has remnant because she's seeking that out too. It's unclear. And speaking of unclear, we still have no information on where she comes from. But there has been one theory floating around with very little linking evidence. The other subplot of these epilogues solely follows Detective Larson trying to investigate the Stitchwraith, and in his investigation, he finds the ball pit from Into the Pit, and notices that there's blood all over most of the balls, so he collects a bunch of them and sends them in for testing. The testing brings results of over 30 different blood samples, all from the same source, but all from different years. Essentially, the results seem to indicate that something has been bleeding into this ball pit for 30 years, at least. Because we had no leads, a lot of people just assumed that these two subplots were related, and whatever Eleanor is, she's been bleeding into the ball pit for 30 years. And maybe that's where she was creating Fazbear Frights nonsense. We really don't know. Frankly, we're not even certain that she's an agony manifestation. We just know that the things she's capable of are things we see other people who definitely are using agony do. Things like throwing people into their worst memories, manifesting black tendrils, and being able to instantly kill people you touch. If the mentions of agony and remnant are starting to lose you, let me just do a very quick summary. I'm not going to even do a bit for this one, don't worry. I lied, we're doing a bit. Anyway, the way possession works in Five Nights at Freddy's is very emotion-based. Positive memories and spirit, whether or not they died horrifically, possessing metal is seen as remnant. And generally, remnant can help do positive things, like expand happy memories, and also allow spirits to possess things. But remnant is specifically the mixture of metal and spirit, whereas agony is the energy associated with the emotion agony. The thesis presented presented in the books is that if something truly horrible happens, nearby objects can be infected with the agony felt in that moment. So agony, while it can be sourced from someone, isn't necessarily a part of that someone. Agony can be added to a consciousness to create a sort of possession. That's how the Stitch Wraith is created. The scientist working on it pumps a bunch of agony into an endoskeleton and then adds 2 haunted objects that he thinks may have a consciousness attached to them. And suddenly, the Stitch Wraith gets up and walks around. So now that we're all caught up, the theory was that Eleanor might be born from the ball pit and is probably an agony manifestation, but even though we had this evidence, we had nothing that directly linked Eleanor to the ball pit. Well, nothing until a book came out that gave us a little bit more context. What book? Mark doesn't want to do book time. What book? Obviously, it's Into the Wrong Pit book. Return to the Pit. Seriously, Scott? You have a problem. If I had a physical copy of Into the Pit, I'd hold it up too. Return to the Pit is the interactive novel version of Scott's favorite child, Into the Pit. It's an incredibly strange book that I actually just made a whole video on, trying to figure out if this is either in the game's timeline, in the book's timeline, or in its own brand new timeline, because it's that deeply weird. But for now, I think for the most part, the details we get in this book are within the game's timeline moving forward. And this book is useful even with all of the strange moments within it. In fact, especially for some of its strangest moments. And today we're going to focus on one of those strangest, wildest moments. By now, I'm sure you know the story of Into the Pit, but just in case you don't, or you've been forgetting, or you want to refresh, very, very briefly. Oswald is a child who finds out the ball pit in his local Jeff's Pizza can transport him back to the 1985 Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. This is likely an agony-induced hallucination, but he might actually be time traveling. It's not necessarily clear. The important thing is that in that ball pit, there's a yellow rabbit mascot suit that has nothing inside but a set of razor-sharp teeth and wants to kill Oswald. It's also capable of replacing his father in the present day only to Oswald. So Oswald has to find a way to save his father and defeat the yellow rabbit. Got it? Good. There's a question we never really get the answer to in either previous versions of Into the Pit. What would happen if Oswald went to the 1985 version of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and left? Just walked out the front doors. In the game, you can do this, but it just shows Oswald sadly wandering the streets and fades to black. So we don't really know what happens. In the original story, never does, but in Return to the Pit, you get the option to leave. Once Oswald exits to an alleyway, he can either leave to the front street or follow a voice that he hears. If you leave to the front street, something incredibly strange happens. Once you get far enough away from the restaurant, the world rapidly ages in front of you until you're back in the modern day. But Oswald takes a look at himself and notices that he aged as well, and he's now like 40, which definitely implies that real actual time travel is taking place, but we don't have time to get into that today. What we're curious on is when Oswald leaves into the alleyway, he hears a voice of a small girl calling out for help. And if you try to investigate that crying, you get this insanity. Quote, "You make your way to a pair of wooden doors that lead down into some kind of cellar. There doesn't appear to be a lock on them. You pull the door up enough that the gravity grabs it from the other side, and it falls open, hard. You can see cement stairs, and now you hear, 'Hurry, please.' You stare down into the cellar. The cement stairs lead into darkness. You take a few steps down the stairs, and your eyes are able to adjust to the darkness as more steps materialize before you. Then you see her, or it? You stop on the third step down. About 5 more steps away, sitting in the shadow, you see a toy doll that resembles a little girl. She has red hair and pigtails and is wearing a red dress to match her hair. Her face, legs, and arms are bone white, and she has a blood red nose and crimson circles on her cheeks. Her entire appearance is unnerving. She is silent. 'Hello?' You call out. 'Is anyone there?' Maybe the girl who owns the doll is trapped farther into the darkness. 'Please help me.' The voice sounds like it's coming from the doll, but that makes no sense. Then again, time travel and creepy rabbit mascots also make no sense. You turn around. The rabbit is there, standing above you. You stare at it for a moment, and then it shoves you hard. You fall down all the steps onto the cement floor, cracking your head against it. You can feel something wet and warm oozing from beneath you. The rabbit starts to walk down the stairs toward you, backlit by the bright sunshine outside. He is a giant silhouette, looming. You hear the sound of laughter beside you, high-pitched giggling. You turn your head to look at the doll. She sits there, perfectly still, but the laughter gets louder and louder. Her head suddenly snaps to look at you. You struggle to get away. The rabbit is there. It attacks. You feel sharp, cold pain and scream out. This is wild. And frankly, even in an insane book, this is one of the most insane moments. But it's also kind of telling us a lot, isn't it? Once again, here's how the doll's described. Red hair, pigtails, red dress to match, red cheeks, red lips. Do you remember how Eleanor's described? Pink Cupid's bow lips, pink circles on its cheeks, its face was painted like a clown's, but a pretty clown. Its red hair was pulled up into twin pigtails on top of its head. Now I hear you. This is not the same exact description, and we never get Eleanor's nose described. She might not even have one for all we know. But keep in mind, this is a doll within an agony-induced time travel hallucination, and Eleanor is an animatronic. So the fact that this seems to be a doll version of the animatronic Eleanor, I don't think is an accident. Almost like Eleanor, a thing that takes many forms in the story she comes from, is taking another form within this agony space. Now, some people have said that this is a Circus Baby doll, and frankly, I understand the confusion, because Circus Baby and Eleanor are basically like weird sisters. But frankly, it is hard to give you a good explanation as to why they look differently, because we don't have great visuals for Eleanor. So I think what's most likely here is that Eleanor and Circus Baby look similar because they're both clown girls, and there's just two examples of clown girls that we have in this franchise, because there seems to be a whole clown era somewhere in Fazbear's history that we haven't gotten a lot of details on yet. But while this description could loosely fit Eleanor or Circus Baby, I ask you this: if you think it's a doll of Circus Baby, why? Circus Baby would be representative of either Circus Baby or Elizabeth Afton, and frankly, for a ball pit in Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, I can't think of any reason why Elizabeth Afton's presence or Circus Baby's presence would be felt here. But we do already have some loose evidence that suggests Eleanor is connected to this ball pit. So I'm going to say that this doll is meant to be a doll version of Eleanor until proven otherwise. But if that's true, why does it matter? What could any of this possibly mean? There's something very important that needs to be understood about Eleanor that you might not know if you haven't read the books. And that's that Eleanor is not part of William Afton. Even if she's born out of Afton's agony, which is unclear, Eleanor is not a servant to William like Vanny is to Glitchtrap. Eleanor jumped into the Afton amalgamation to become a part of it, but it's implied that she wanted to take it over, and she jumped ship the moment he's in trouble. So if that's true, let's look back at the characters we have in the ball pit. We have the Yellow Rabbit, which is commonly theorized to be a manifestation of agony piloted by the consciousness of William Afton, or at least William Afton's consciousness has influenced its creation. And if this cellar doll scene is to be believed, even though Eleanor isn't working for William Afton, she's helping him kidnap Oswald, or in this case, I guess just kill him. So if there are two separate entities within the ball pit, and one of them is using the consciousness of William Afton, are there any other consciousnesses that could be piloting the agony for Eleanor? Well, frankly, the only other viable candidate here is the missing child incident victims. But I hear you, why would the missing child incident victims help William Afton kill a child? Well, that really comes down to the way that spirits and memory work in this franchise, because the missing child incident victims helping William to kidnap children is actually a really common theme in FNAF. We see this in the Silver Eyes and in the FNAF movie. When the ghost children are dead, before they're helped and given their memories back, they don't really know what's going on. They just think they're playing with their rabbit friend, and William is exploiting and manipulating that to use them as servants. So there's already precedent for the MCI victims unknowingly helping William. But we're not even talking about their spirits here, we're talking about agony, and we have even more evidence that something taken over by agony could act this way. Andrew, one half of the Stitch Wraith, is primarily made up of agony when we meet him. But through talking with Jake, we learned that for a long time, all he wanted to do was spread his agony to as many things as possible, infecting everything he touched and killing anyone nearby. And even he isn't sure why. And Andrew is a victim of William Afton as well. So we have an example of both explanations for what Eleanor might be. If it's actually the spirits of the MCI, we have evidence showing that they would unwittingly help William. And if it's just agony but being piloted, we have evidence that when you're that much agony, you just want to kill everything nearby. All of this evidence seems to be suggesting that Eleanor is a manifestation of agony being controlled by the trauma and consciousness of the missing child incident victims, given form as this weird, tall circus baby for some reason. But in a way, this also makes the first climax of the Fazbear Frights epilogues line up with the FNAF 6 fire in a very interesting way. Like I mentioned, all the pieces of William Afton are gathered in one place and are attempted to be destroyed, but it's not fully beaten until Detective Larson throws the puppet mask inside of it, and then it finally falls apart and dies, sinking into a lake. But think about the players we have here. We have William Afton, Scraptrap, or the Agony. We have a combination of his victims, Molten Freddy, Eleanor. We have the marionette, Lefty, or its broken mask. We have the quote-unquote good guy just trying to make good on what he's done, Michael Afton or Jake. Or we have the older mentor trying to fix everything, Henry Emily, Detective Larson. The only one we're missing is Scrap Baby. And no, Scrap Baby is not Eleanor. Scrap Baby would be Elizabeth, and she's not here. For some reason, Elizabeth just never shows up in the epilogues. Unless Eleanor is supposed to be Elizabeth, but we have no reason to believe that besides the fact that it's Circus Baby. Kind of, but it's not even Circus Baby. Did I mention that Fazbear Frights epilogues give me a headache? Now, I'm not saying that this is what the books or the games intended, but it does seem like this climax is a recreation of the climax of FNAF 6, which all the more strengthens the idea that Eleanor is a mass combination of all of the MCI victims, just like Molten Freddy. Not to mention, Molten Freddy's first scheme, as Ennard, is to take the identity of someone and escape. And what is the first thing we see Eleanor do? Take the identity of Sarah and escape. It keeps lining up. But if all this is true, and we might know where Eleanor came from, how does she end up in the trunk of a car in a junkyard? Frankly, Return to the Pit doesn't mention that at all. So my best guess is she was setting up a trap for some unsuspecting victim. Sarah might not have even been her first victim, but she was just lying in wait with her arm sticking out of a trunk, waiting for someone whose curiosity would kill them. But what do you think? Did I officially lose it? Because this time more than ever, it feels like I did. Also, Happy New Year. I didn't realize when I was making it or planning stuff, but this is the first video of 2025. So here's to another one, I guess. Let's hope I can get into a real studio by the end of the year, because I miss my studio.